New York City just settled a lawsuit with a bunch of left-wing BLM types. These are the so-called mostly peaceful activists who organized a demonstration. This is in summer 2020. It was a riot, but the police were called in, and the police had to use and did use batons and pepper spray on these rioters. And so the rioters subsequently sued. They sued the city. And the city said, we agree to pay. And so think of how crazy this is. You got the BLM rioters getting $21,000, $21,500 to be precise, apiece. But the passengers and pedestrians who were harassed, the store owners who lost business and whose stores were vandalized and brutalized, they get nothing. Now, this is all a very interesting thing to focus on because it really shows how these activists operate. The left is saying, well, yeah, of course it's right and reasonable that these activists get compensated. Sure, some of them were charged in the aftermath of the riots, but the charges were dropped. Yes, the charges indeed were dropped, but not because these people weren't breaking the law, not because they weren't rioters, not because they weren't damaging property, not because they weren't threatening or harming people. They were dropped because basically the political New York City establishment was in league with the rioters. So the New York political establishment, the Democrats, had no problem with the rioters. The rioters were seen as being on their side. So they're like, oh, you can go, drop charges. This is the double standard of justice that we talk frequently about. There were 118 arrested looters in the Bronx in this particular series of riots. The vast majority had all charges dismissed. And again, they're dropping now $20,000 in compensation to these guys. Most of these guys, by the way, don't work. They're full-time activists. And this is the point. This is how they get paid. What I mean is that you've got this kind of dirty arrangement between left-wing professional activists who collect government benefits, don't really work, but they shake down these cities. And the reason that they can shake down the cities is that the cities don't want to fight with them. In fact, the cities want to pay them. And why do the cities want to pay them? Because the cities really are looting somebody else who's not present to object, namely the taxpayer. The taxpayer is the guy footing the bill. So what happens is that these guys engage in violent activism. By the way, very often when the violent activism is going on, you've got these lawyers from the National Lawyers Guild and other radical left-wing groups. They're on the scene, and they are supposedly, quote, legal observers, but they're not really legal observers. They're legal partisans, and they're, quote, collecting evidence. They're taking photographs. Why? So then they can turn around, these groups can, and sue the government and sue the city council and sue the city establishment to extract money out of them. This stuff can be immensely profitable. Here's a small example. Michael Brown, this is the guy in Ferguson who was shot by a cop. And of course, the mythology around Michael Brown is that he had his hands up at the time, and he was like, hands up, don't shoot. And you had all these activists, hands up, don't shoot. This was all based upon a lie, admittedly a media-encouraged lie. But the lie was the idea that this was actually what's going on. In reality, Michael Brown was running toward the cop to attack him. And in fact, this information was ferreted out in an inquiry that was commissioned and supervised by the Obama administration. So the Obama administration's own inquiry showed that Michael Brown was not the victim, that the police officer was justified in using, in this case, lethal force. And yet, Michael Brown's family got $1.5 million. $1.5 million based upon a fraud, based upon a lie. So there's a whole kind of industry of left-wing lawyers who get money And remember, the lawyers themselves keep some of that money. So the way they operate is they tell these rioters, listen, we'll go to get money for you, but if you get 40,000, you give us 10 or you give us 20. So the arrangement is what is called contingency. We'll take a portion of the amount that we can extract. And of course, these left-wing lawyers know people who are in the city establishment. And the mayor, typically, we're talking about democratic areas like New York City, they have a friend who works in the office of a mayor, another friend who works in the local law enforcement agencies. So this is a rip-off scheme in which the taxpayer and the cities themselves are destroyed while the activists all make off. And I think what makes the whole thing particularly sick is that not only are these people cashing in, but they're cashing in while pretending to be champions of social justice. It's one thing to have a criminal operation, a shakedown operation. The mafia is shaking down money on Canal Street in New York City, but the mafia doesn't pretend to wear a halo. Don Corleone doesn't act like he's a choir boy or he's sort of a clergyman who's motivated by the welfare of society as a whole, and the only reason that he's doing bootlegging and blackmail and prostitution and murder is because this is all very good for society. No, his idea is, I'm doing this to protect my family, and I'm doing it because this is how you survive in a harsh world. And yet these social justice activists like to masquerade as if they are motivated by something other than crass self-interest. As it turns out, they're not. They're rip-off artists. They aren't even willing to do an honest day's work. They not only want to engage in the antisocial activity of doing riots, they want the cities to pay them for it.